You remember that broken suitcase. You remember that wrong turn. You remember a woman who walked into someone else's wedding and rewrote the ending completely. Part 3 is here, and she is getting everything. The Brooklyn night was warm and unhurried. They had been walking for 20 minutes and neither of them had suggested stopping and neither of them had mentioned the time, and the city around them had done what New York occasionally did on summer nights. Softened just slightly, just enough to make you forget it was a city at all and remember it was just a place where people lived and felt things. Maya's apartment was on a tree-lined street in Brooklyn that she had chosen specifically because of the trees. After years in Atlanta where trees were a given, she had not anticipated how much she would need them in New York. The way they broke the geometry of the buildings, the way they moved in the evening breeze like they had somewhere to be and were not particularly rushed about getting there. She stopped in front of a brownstone with a dark green door and a small iron railing and window boxes. She had planted herself in June with white impatience that had somehow survived the summer heat. "This is me," she said. Jiwon looked at the brownstone. He looked at the window boxes. He looked at the dark green door and the small brass numbers beside it and the way the street lamp caught the white flowers in the boxes and made them glow. "It suits you," he said. She looked at him. "You haven't seen the inside." "I don't need to," he said simply. "It suits you from out here." Maya looked at her window boxes for a moment. She had bought the impatiens from a farmer's market 3 blocks over on a Saturday morning in June, when she had been in New York for exactly 3 weeks and had needed something that felt like a decision about staying. She had carried them home in a paper bag and planted them in the boxes alone with her hands in the dirt and had felt, for the first time since leaving Atlanta, like she was building something real. He had just seen all of that in a window box without her saying a word. "Do you want to come up?" she said. He met her eyes. "Yes," he said, not eagerly, not with performance. Just yes, honest and clear, the way he said everything that mattered. The apartment was small in the way that Brooklyn apartments were small. Not apologetically small, but intentionally small, the smallness of a person who had chosen carefully rather than settled reluctantly. The living room had a deep blue sofa she had found at a vintage market and reupholstered herself over a long weekend with Diane's help and a lot of arguing. The bookshelves were mismatched and full, the kind of full that said these books were read and loved and put back imperfectly because they were used not displayed. A large window overlooked the street and the trees and the lamplight, and on the windowsill she had placed 3 small plants that she talked to on bad days when she needed something to take care of that would not talk back. On the small kitchen counter his grandmother's book sat beside her coffee maker, its spine gently creased from being read and held and carried. Jiwon saw it immediately. He crossed to it before he even fully took in the rest of the room, the way people moved toward things that mattered before their brain caught up with their feet. He picked it up carefully, the way you picked up something that belonged to someone you loved, and looked at the creased spine and the turned-down corner of a page near the end. "You marked a page," he said. "I always mark pages," she said, coming to stand beside him. "Your grandmother's rule was you finish the book." She did not say anything about not marking the good parts. He opened to the marked page. Read the passage she had marked. She watched his face while he read it and saw the moment it landed. Something quiet and significant moving through his expression. He closed the book carefully and set it back exactly where it had been. "She would have liked you," he said quietly. "I know," Maya said. And she did know, the way she knew some things without evidence, the way the book had felt like a conversation with someone she had never met but somehow already understood. He turned to look at her and they were close in the small kitchen the way people were close in small kitchens, closer than they would have been in a larger space, close enough that the air between them was aware of itself. "Maya," he said. "I know," she said again, softly. "I'm not going to say anything that puts pressure on you," he said. "I want to be clear about that. But I am going to say one thing and then I am going to let you decide what to do with it." She waited. "I have been looking forward to Sundays since the first one," he said. "Not the call. Not the conversation specifically. Just the day. Knowing that at some point during it I was going to hear your voice and know how things were going." He held her gaze. "That has been the best part of my week for 3 months. I wanted you to know that." The kitchen was very quiet. Outside the window the trees moved in the warm August breeze. Maya looked at this man who had come to her city with a work project and a truth he needed to say in person, and had walked her home and seen her window boxes and understood them and picked up a dead woman's book like it was something precious. She reached up and put her hand against his face. He went very still. The kind of still that was not absence but presence. Complete, full, every part of him attending to the single point of her hand against his jaw. "The best part of my week too," she said quietly. "Every Sunday." He covered her hand with his, held it there. They stayed like that for a moment that had no interest in being measured. Then he turned his face slightly and pressed his lips to her palm. Not dramatically, not with theater, just a quiet, deliberate thing that said everything it needed to say without a single word. Maya felt it in her chest and did not try to manage it. She was done managing things that deserved to be felt. He stayed for 2 hours. They sat on the blue sofa with the window open and the warm night coming in and talked the way they had never quite talked on Sunday phone calls. Not because the calls weren't real, but because there was something that proximity did, something that being in the same room with a person did, that no phone call could fully replicate. The way you could see someone's face change when they were thinking. The way silence had a different texture when you were sharing it in person. She told him about her grandmother's house in Alabama where she had spent summers as a child. The kitchen that smelled like cornbread and something floral. The porch where her grandmother sat in the evenings and watched the light change and called it her daily miracle. He told her about his grandmother's garden in Georgia, the one that had preceded the estate's current rose garden, smaller and wilder and tended with the specific devotion of a woman who believed that growing things was a form of prayer. They would have sat on a porch together, Maya said. Yes, he said. And they would not have needed to say very much. She looked at him in the lamplight of her small Brooklyn living room and thought about how some things felt like they had been coming for a long time. Not in a way that made them inevitable, in a way that made them earned. When he finally stood to leave, she walked him to the door. He paused on the threshold, his thing, the pause at the door, the one last thing, and turned back. Next Sunday, he said. You'll be back in Atlanta, she said. Yes, he said. But I'll call. She smiled. I know you will. He looked at her for a moment with all the composure down, just looking the way he looked at things he found genuinely remarkable, without apology and without theater. Good night, Maya, he said. Good night, Jiwon, she said. She closed the door and stood on her side of it and pressed her back against the wood and looked at her small, beautiful apartment. The blue sofa, the full bookshelves, the window boxes she could just see through the glass, the grandmother's book on the kitchen counter, and felt the particular feeling of a life that was entirely hers, also making room for something new. She did not fight it. She had learned, finally, the difference between protecting yourself and punishing yourself. She was done with the second one. September arrived and brought with it the particular clarity of New York in early fall. The air changed first. Not cold yet, but sharper, more intentional. As if the city had shaken off the heavy dreaming of summer and remembered it had things to do. The trees on Maya's street began their slow consideration of color, just the edges of the leaves first, a suggestion of gold that would become a declaration by October. Maya noticed all of it. She noticed things more now. Had been noticing more since August, since the Brooklyn restaurant and the walk home and the hand against the jaw and the 2 hours on the blue sofa. It was as if something in her had been recalibrated. Some instrument that had been slightly off for a long time quietly corrected itself, and now she was picking up frequencies she had been missing. Sundays were the best days. He called it 7 in the evening Atlanta time, which was 7 in the evening New York time, and she made tea and sat on her balcony or her sofa depending on the weather, and they talked for an hour that was never quite an hour because neither of them was very good at stopping when the hour was up. The calls had changed since August. Not dramatically, Jiwon did not do dramatic changes, he did gradual honest ones. But the texture was different. Warmer. Less careful. The specific carefulness of two people managing a distance had relaxed into something more like two people who had acknowledged the distance and decided it was temporary. He sent her things. Not extravagant things. He was not a man who communicated through extravagance. Small things. A photograph he had taken of the rose garden at the estate on a Tuesday morning when the light was doing something specific, sent with no caption because the image said what it needed to. An article about an event coordination firm in New York that had done something innovative, sent with a single line, thought of you immediately. A recommendation for a restaurant 2 blocks from her apartment that his college friend had told him about, sent with tell me what you think. She sent things back. A photograph of her window boxes in October when the impatience finally gave up and she replaced them with small orange chrysanthemums. Sent with seasonal transition. A voice note of the specific sound her Brooklyn street made on a Sunday morning. Sent with "This is what your call interrupts." A photograph of his grandmother's book finished, the back cover face up on her kitchen counter. Sent with "She had extraordinary taste." You were right. He responded to that last one with a single line that she read 3 times. Come to Atlanta. I want to show you something. She went in October. Sungjin picked her up from the airport and she sat in the back of the black car and watched Atlanta come back to her through the window. Familiar and strange at once. The city she had been leaving when all of this began. Looking different now the way places always look different when you return to them as a different version of yourself. Miss Carter, Sungjin said from the front. It is very good to have you back. It's good to be back, Sungjin, she said, and meant it more than she expected to. Mr. Han has been. He stopped, smiled in the discreet way of a man who had 19 years of practice at discretion. He has been looking forward to your visit. Has he? She said. Since Tuesday, Sungjin said, when he confirmed your flight. Maya looked out the window and let herself smile because Sungjin was focused on the road and she had earned it. Jiwon was waiting at the guest house. Not the main house, the guest house, and she understood immediately that this was intentional, that he had thought about where she should arrive and had chosen the place that was hers, the place that had been hers from the beginning. He was standing on the stone path beside the fountain and the climbing roses had turned slightly in the October air. The blooms smaller and more concentrated than they had been in May but still holding, still there, still climbing the white wall with the patient ambition of something that had decided where it was going and was not in any rush about it. He looked. She let herself look, fully, the way she had learned to let herself feel things. Like the best version of himself. Not the bored dinner version, not the managing everything version. Just Jiwon, standing beside a fountain in October, waiting for her like it was the most natural thing he had ever done. Hi, she said when she reached him. Hi, he said. He looked at her for a moment and then he did something he had not done before. He pulled her into a hug, properly, both arms, the kind of hug that meant something had shifted into a new place and was comfortable there. She went into it without hesitation and felt the warmth of it and the steadiness of it and the very specific feeling of being held by someone who was holding you because they wanted to and for no other reason. I missed you, he said into her hair. Simply, factually. I missed you too, she said. They stood beside the fountain in the October afternoon and the roses held the wall and the water kept its time and it was the easiest thing that had happened between them and also somehow the most significant. He had wanted to show her the library. Specifically, the east wall, his grandmother's collection, because he had added something to it. At the end, in the space after the last book his grandmother had placed there, he had put her finished copy. The one she had sent back to him after she finished it with a note tucked inside that said she had extraordinary taste and so do you. He had given it its own space on the shelf. Maya stood in front of it and felt her throat do something she managed quietly and professionally in the way she managed most things that hit her harder than expected. You shelved it, she said. It belongs here, he said. You finished it. That was the rule. She turned to look at him. He was watching her with the open expression she had learned was his real face. Not the composed public one but this one, the one that came out in libraries and guesthouses and small Brooklyn apartments at night. Jiwon, she said. Yes, he said. I think I am falling in love with you, she said. Not dramatically. Not with a trembling voice or a grand gesture. Just the truth said directly the way she said everything that mattered, because she had learned it from him and because some things deserved to be said out loud in the room where they were true. He crossed the library in 4 steps and cupped her face in both hands and looked at her with everything down, all the composure, all the management, just him completely. Maya, he said, I have been in love with you since you took your shoes off in my rose garden and asked me for something true. She laughed. Surprised into it, genuinely, the best kind of laugh. That was day 1, she said. I know, he said. I told you I noticed things. She put her hands over his hands on her face and looked at him in the library that his grandmother had built and felt the particular feeling of something that had been growing in the careful spaces between Sunday phone calls and small scent photographs and one walk home in Brooklyn arriving, finally, at its full size. He kissed her. Not urgently, with the same quality he brought to everything, present and intentional and completely there. A kiss that knew exactly what it was and did not need to be anything else. She kissed him back. Outside the library windows, the October light was doing something golden and unreasonable, and neither of them noticed because they were otherwise entirely occupied. November in Atlanta was its own kind of beautiful. Not the dramatic fall of New York with its blazing declarations of color, but something quieter. The Georgia trees letting go gently, the air cooling to something that finally felt like relief after the long insistence of summer, the light going golden earlier and staying that way longer as if it too was reluctant to let the good days end. Maya split her time. It had been her decision, made practically, professionally, with the same clear-headed assessment she brought to everything. Her firm had clients in both cities now. New York was her base, her growth, the thing she was building. Atlanta was where the Rose Garden was, where the library was, where Jiwon was. She kept her Brooklyn apartment. He never suggested she shouldn't. What he did instead was make the guest house hers in every way that mattered, not by filling it with things but by leaving space in it. A shelf in the bathroom that held only what she kept there. A hook by the door for her specific coat. The kitchen stocked with the tea she preferred because he had noticed on her first visit which one she reached for. Small things. Intentional things. The language of a man who communicated care through attention. Jiwon called it aggressively thoughtful. He is the most aggressively thoughtful person I have ever known, she told Maya over video call one November evening, in the fond, exasperated tone of a younger sibling who had been on the receiving end of this quality for 27 years. When I was in college, he sent me a care package every month. Not random things. Specific things he had noticed I mentioned needing. Every single month for 4 years. That's, Maya started. Exhausting and wonderful, Jiwon finished. Yes. Welcome to loving Han Jiwon. She grinned. You are going to be so well taken care of, and occasionally want to throw something at him. Maya laughed. Has anyone ever thrown something at him? Our mother threw a dish towel at him once in 2019, Jiwon said solemnly. He caught it, without looking up from his phone. She did not know whether to be more annoyed or impressed. Mrs. Han had her own way of showing acceptance. It was not warm in the conventional sense. Han Myri was not a woman who expressed things conventionally. But Maya had learned to read her the way she read rooms, the way she read people, and what she saw in November was unmistakable. Mrs. Han asked for her opinion. Not about events. About things that mattered. The renovation of the East Garden. Should they keep the existing rose arrangement or consider something new? The menu for a family dinner in December. Did Maya have a preference? A dress she was considering for a board function. She sent a photograph and asked, what do you think, with the directness of a woman who only asked questions she actually wanted answers to. Maya answered everything directly and honestly, the way she always did, and Mrs. Han took her answers seriously. And that was the Han Myri version of love, and Maya received it exactly as it was meant. Han Young-soo was simpler about it. He told Jiwon, in Maya's presence at a Sunday family dinner in November, that the Q3 expansion was performing ahead of projection. And then he looked at Maya and said, the board dinner was the turning point. You know that. Your son was the turning point, she said. I just arranged the room. Han Young-soo looked at her with the expression she had first seen in the Rose Garden on a Thursday morning, the expression of a man quietly revising something. You are going to argue with me for the rest of my life about this, he said. Yes, she said pleasantly. I am. Something happened in his face that was, unmistakably, delight. Jiwon beside her was looking at his water glass with the expression of a man working very hard not to smile. December came, and with it the particular magic of the Han estate in winter. Maya had not seen it in any season but late spring, and she was not prepared for what the estate did with December. The way the white stone looked against the bare trees, the way the garden settled into its winter quiet, the rose bushes pruned back and resting, patient, knowing what they would become again. The guest house had a fireplace, and Jiwon lit it on her first December evening there, and they sat in front of it on the floor with wine and the specific comfort of two people who had passed the stage of performing ease and arrived at the real thing. Tell me something you want, he said. It was their thing now, the asking for true things, the answering of them. It had started in a rose garden on the worst morning of his life, and it had become the foundation of everything, the practice they returned to, the way they kept the connection real. "I want my firm to have its own office space by next year," she said. "Not a co-working situation. Our own space, with our name on the door." "You'll have it," he said. "You don't know that, Maya." He looked at her with patient certainty. "You will have it." She held his gaze for a moment. "Your turn," she said. He was quiet for a moment, in the way of someone selecting carefully from something large. "I want Sunday to stop being the best day of the week," he said. She looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means I want every day to be as good as Sunday," he said. "It means I want—" He stopped, looked at the fire, looked back at her. "It means I don't want to count days between seeing you anymore. I've been counting since August, and I'm ready to stop counting." The fire made its sound. Outside, the December night was still and cold, and the estate was quiet in every direction. Maya looked at this man who had lit a fire and sat on the floor and asked her true things and meant every word of every answer he had ever given her. "I'm not going anywhere, Jiwon," she said softly. "I know," he said. "I know you're not going anywhere. I want you to be here, specifically here, not divided between here and there, not splitting weeks, not Sunday calls. Just—" He reached over and took her hand where it rested on the floor between them. "Here, with me, building something that's both of ours. The fire, the winter quiet." His hand holding hers on the floor of the guest house where this had all begun. "That's not a small ask," she said carefully. "No," he said. "It isn't. Take whatever time you need to think about it." She looked at the fire for a long moment. Thought about the Brooklyn apartment with its blue sofa and its window boxes and the shelf in the bathroom and the hook by the door and the tea he always had ready. "My lease in Brooklyn is up in February," she said. He went very still in the way that meant he was attending to something completely. "There are good commercial spaces in Atlanta," she said, "for a firm with ambition. The market is different from New York, but it is not small." "No," he said carefully. "It is not small. And I would need my own space," she said. "In whatever arrangement. I don't do well without a space that is specifically mine." "The guest house," he said. "It has always been yours." She turned to look at him fully. He was watching her with everything open. No composure, no management. Just Jiwon, waiting for something he wanted very much and refusing to push for it. "Okay," she said. "Okay?" he said. "Okay," she said again. "February. I will let the Brooklyn lease go in February." He looked at her for a long moment and then he pulled her into him, both arms again. The hug that meant something had settled into its right place, and she went into it and felt the warmth of it and the steadiness of it and the December fire on both their faces. "Thank you," he said into her hair. "Don't thank me," she said. "I'm doing it because I want to. That's the only reason I do anything." She felt him smile against the top of her head. "I know," he said. "That's one of my favorite things about you. It happened on a Tuesday, not a Sunday, not a special occasion, not a planned evening with candles and a reservation somewhere significant. A Tuesday in March, which was perhaps the least romantic-sounding day of the week, and which was exactly why it was perfect." Maya had been in Atlanta full-time for 3 weeks. Her firm had taken a commercial space in Midtown Atlanta. Not large, not yet, but real, with their name on the door in clean, simple lettering that she had chosen herself and stood in front of for a long moment on the morning the sign went up. She had 2 full-time employees now, both women she had recruited carefully and specifically, and the client list had followed her from New York with a loyalty that told her she had built something real. She had her rhythm. Mornings in the guest house, coffee by the courtyard window, the fountain doing its thing. Work at the office through the day. Evenings that varied, sometimes the main house for dinner, sometimes the guest house, sometimes Jiwon came to her office and they went somewhere in the city together in the easy way of 2 people for whom going somewhere together had become the default. It was, she thought on a regular basis, a very good life. Tuesdays started normally. She was in the kitchen of the guest house making her second cup of coffee at 7:30 when Jiwon came in. His own rhythm. The morning check-in that was not a check-in but simply what they did. the casual presence of two people who had made space for each other in the architecture of their days. He was in his work clothes, the dark suit, the precise shirt, Tuesday at Han Construction starting at 8, and he had his phone in one hand and his own coffee in the other, and he looked, she thought with the warm private thought she kept to herself, extraordinarily good in the Tuesday morning light. He set his coffee down and looked at something on his phone and then set the phone down too and looked at her. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," he said. He looked at her for a moment with a specific quality of attention that was different from his usual attention, which was already significant. This was concentrated, like a man who had decided something and was now simply doing it. "I have a question," he said. "Okay," she said, wrapping both hands around her mug the way she did when she was giving someone her full attention. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. What he produced was not a box. It was an envelope, a cream envelope, the same kind the contract had come in on that first morning. The morning she had read it twice, slowly, the way her father had taught her, and she felt something move through her chest at the sight of it. He set it on the counter between them. "Open it," he said. She set down her coffee, picked up the envelope, opened it with the care of someone who understood that envelopes from this particular man contained things that mattered. Inside was a single sheet of paper. At the top, in his precise angular handwriting, it said, "Amendment to the original agreement." She looked up at him. He was watching her with the open expression, the real one. She looked back down and read, "The original agreement between Han Jiwon and Maya Danielle Carter. Dated May of this year. Established terms for a period of 1 week. The undersigned party hereby proposes an amendment. New term, permanent. New conditions, none. Maya Carter requires no conditions. She is sufficient exactly as she is. New consideration, everything. All of it, for as long as she will have it." The undersigned party further notes that this amendment is non-negotiable, not because the other party has no choice, but because the undersigned party has made his choice completely and without reservation and wishes to be clear about it. The question, stated simply, "Maya, will you marry me?" Han Jiwon. Maya stood in the guesthouse kitchen on a Tuesday morning in March with a piece of paper in her hands, and her coffee getting cold on the counter, and the fountain doing its thing in the courtyard, and the climbing roses beginning their spring return on the east wall outside the window. She was not crying. She was doing something adjacent to crying that she was managing with the specific effort of a woman who did not like to cry in kitchens before 8 in the morning. She looked up. He had moved around the counter while she was reading, and he was close now, and he was holding a ring, small and real and extraordinary, not enormous, not performative, a single stone set simply in warm gold that looked like something chosen with complete knowledge of the person it was for. "An envelope," she said. Her voice was steady. "Mostly. You read contracts twice," he said. "I wanted to give you something to read." "Jiwon. The question is at the bottom," he said. Stated simply. "I meant it simply." She looked at the ring. She looked at him. She looked at the envelope in her hand and thought about the first envelope, the one with the contract, the one she had read twice on a morning when she had not known yet what any of this was going to become. She thought about the wrong car and the broken suitcase and the $40 and the green silk dress and the rose garden and the library and the Brooklyn apartment and the window boxes and the fire on the guesthouse floor in December and every Sunday phone call and the name on her office door and the hook by the entrance that held her coat. "You wrote me a contract," she said. "I did," he said. "For a marriage proposal," she said. "You appreciate clarity," he said. "And documented agreements." A laugh came out of her, the best kind, surprised and genuine and slightly undone, and she pressed her hand over her mouth, and he watched her laugh with the expression of a man who had been hoping for exactly this reaction and was deeply satisfied to have produced it. "Han Jiwon," she said when the laugh settled. "Yes," he said. "This is the most ridiculous and most perfect thing anyone has ever done for me," she said. "Is that a yes?" he said. Not anxiously, just asking, direct and clear, the way he asked everything. She looked at him, at the ring, at the man who had lit fires and shelved books and stocked tea and sent photographs of rose gardens on Tuesday mornings, and written her a contract amendment for a marriage proposal on the least romantic day of the week. "Yes," she said. "Obviously yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and it fit exactly right, and she thought briefly that she should not be surprised by this and was anyway, and then he pulled her into him and she went, and they stood in the guest house kitchen on a Tuesday morning with the fountain in the courtyard and the roses coming back on the wall and the whole unreasonable beautiful impossibility of how they had found each other held between them like something they were both being very careful with. "A contract amendment," she said into his shoulder. "It seemed appropriate," he said. "It was," she said. "It really was." Jiwon's response when she called to tell her was a sound that could not be transcribed into any known alphabet and lasted approximately 4 seconds. Then, "I knew it. I knew it from the terrace. I knew it from the first terrace." "You did," Maya confirmed. "Does it fit? Is it beautiful? Tell me everything." "It fits perfectly," Maya said. "It's him. It's completely him." "I helped," Jiwon said immediately. "Did you?" "I was consulted," Jiwon said, in a tone that suggested the consultation had been significant. "He called me in January. He described you and asked me what you would want, and I told him exactly, and he listened to every word and then went and did something completely his own that was better than anything I suggested." Maya laughed. "That sounds exactly like him." "That is him," Jiwon said. "Welcome to the family officially. I have been waiting to say that since May." A pause. "Also, I am a bridesmaid. That is non-negotiable. Do not even have the conversation." "Jiwon. Non-negotiable." A beat. "I love you, Maya." "I love you too," Maya said, and meant it completely. This woman who had handed her wine on a terrace and said "you're real" like it was the most significant observation, who had been on her side before she knew what the sides were. They chose June. Because June was when it had started. A June morning when a driver took the wrong street and the whole direction of 2 lives changed. Because the rose garden was at its most extraordinary in June. The climbing roses on the guest house wall and the estate roses both in full declaration, pink and white and cream against the Georgia blue sky. Because it felt right to end where they had begun. Or not end, begin. The right word was begin. Maya planned her own wedding. Of course she did. She was an event coordinator with 17 weddings behind her and a firm with her name on the door and very specific opinions about how things should be done. She did not relinquish control, and nobody suggested she should. What she did instead was build a team around herself. Mizo, who had become something between a colleague and a co-conspirator over the months, and 2 of her own staff, and Jiwon, who had appointed herself creative director with an authority that nobody had granted and nobody tried to revoke. Mrs. Han contributed in the way Mrs. Han contributed. With resources, with specific and useful opinions delivered directly, and with the particular fierce quiet energy of a woman who was planning something for someone she had decided mattered. Han Young-soo stayed out of the details and wrote a check whose number Maya saw once and did not look at again because some numbers changed the way you felt about things, and she preferred to feel about this the way she already felt about it. The guest list was 200. Not 500. 200. People who were actually in their lives, people who knew the real story or enough of it, people who would fill the garden not as an audience but as witnesses. Sungjin polished the car. He did this personally on a Thursday morning 2 weeks before the wedding, with the same dignity he applied to everything. Mizo found him at it and asked what he was doing, and he said simply that it seemed appropriate, that the car had started something and it should be present when the something was completed. Mizo agreed. Maya got ready in the guest house. Of course she did. Jiwon was there, and Diane, who had flown in from New York the day before and had cried at the airport when she saw the ring and then immediately started critiquing Jiwon's proposal method and finding it eventually and reluctantly perfect. And 2 of her closest friends from Atlanta who had known her before Derek and the burned-down life and who understood what this was on every level it needed to be understood on. The dress was hers. Not chosen by a committee, not selected from a rack, not pulled from a house account. She had worked with a designer she found herself. A black woman in Atlanta who made things with the specific intention of making the person wearing them feel like the fullest version of themselves. And what had resulted was a dress that would stop everything in the garden when she appeared. Ivory silk, structured at the top with a deep square neckline that was elegant and assured. A skirt that gathered at the waist and fell into something full and soft and completely bridal without being fragile. Her natural hair was out. All of it, full and crowned and exactly as it grew from her head, because she was not diminishing a single thing about herself today of all days. Simple diamond drops at her ears that had belonged to her grandmother. carried from Alabama by her mother who had driven up the day before, and who had pressed them into Maya's hands that morning without a word because some things did not need words. She stood in front of the full-length mirror in the guesthouse bedroom and looked at herself. Jiwon, beside her, said nothing for a full 10 seconds, which was unprecedented. Then, Maya. I know, Maya said. No, I don't think you do, Jiwon said. I don't think you fully, she stopped. He is going to completely fall apart when he sees you. He doesn't fall apart, Maya said. He's composed. He is going to fall apart, Jiwon said with complete certainty. I know my brother. Diane, from the corner where she was touching up her own makeup, said, Baby, if that man does not fall apart when he sees you in that dress, I will personally drive back to the airport. Maya laughed, looked at herself in the mirror, at the dress and the hair and her grandmother's diamonds and the ring on her left hand that had come in a cream envelope on a Tuesday morning. She thought, simply exactly herself. That was all she had ever needed to be. The garden was full of June. The roses were everything she had hoped. The climbing roses on the guesthouse wall in full exuberant bloom. The estate roses lining the ceremony path in alternating pink and white and cream. The silk tent panels from that first Saturday were back. The same warm white, but arranged differently now. Not for a reception covering a missing bride, but for a ceremony that was exactly what it was meant to be. 200 people in the garden in the June afternoon, and the string quartet playing something that moved through the warm air like it belonged there. Sungjin stood near the back with his hands clasped and his uniform pressed and his silver hair neat beneath the June sky and watched with the expression of a man who had been waiting for this specific outcome since a Thursday morning when he had taken a wrong street and found something right. Han Young-soo stood at the front, and for the first time in Maya's observation of him, his composure was not the performance of a man maintaining control, but the genuine stillness of a man who was very full and was holding it carefully. Mrs. Han was in the front row in a dress the color of soft lavender, and her expression was the warmest Maya had ever seen it, and it was going to stay that way for the rest of the afternoon. Jiwon walked Maya down from the guesthouse. Not down the aisle, down the garden path, the stone path she had first walked on a Saturday evening in May with Sungjin and her broken suitcase. The path that led from the guesthouse through the garden to the main estate grounds where the ceremony waited. They walked it slowly, the roses on the guesthouse wall above them, the fountain keeping its time in the courtyard behind them, the afternoon light doing the June thing it had been doing all along. Ready, Jiwon said. Yes, Maya said, without hesitation, without drama, just yes, honest and clear, the way she said everything that mattered. Jiwon was standing at the end of the aisle. He was in a suit the color of deep charcoal. Not the wedding suit from May, something new, something chosen for today and no other day, and he was standing with his hands clasped in front of him and his face. Jiwon had been right. He saw Maya at the entrance to the garden, and something happened in his face that had nothing to do with composure. It was not dramatic, he was never dramatic, but it was complete. Every managed thing, every maintained thing, every carefully held thing simply was not there anymore. Just him, looking at her, the way he had looked at her across a rose garden on the worst morning of his life and decided she was remarkable. She walked toward him. 200 people and the string quartet and the June roses and the Han estate in full summer glory, and she walked toward him with her grandmother's diamonds and her natural hair and the ivory silk dress and her spine straight and her eyes on his face, and she felt like herself, completely, without reduction, the full exact version of Maya Danielle Carter walking toward the thing she had chosen on her own terms. He held out his hand when she reached him. She took it. His hand was warm and steady and held hers with the complete attention he gave to everything he decided mattered. Hi, he said quietly, just for her. Hi, she said. He stopped, started again. Maya, I know, she said softly. I know. He smiled, the real one, the one that transformed his face, the one she had been collecting since a rose garden bench in May, and she smiled back, and the officiant said something, and the garden was full of June, and neither of them heard the first sentence because they were still just looking at each other, the way they had looked at each other across distances and through library windows and over kitchen counters and in Brooklyn restaurants for the better part of a year. Two people who had been paying attention. Two people who had told each other true things. Two people who had gotten there, finally, completely, exactly as themselves. The reception was everything. Not because it was perfect, though it was, but because it was real. The kind of real that happened when 200 people who actually loved you filled a garden and meant every moment of it. Diane gave a speech that started as a toast and became a full testimony and ended with her pointing at Jiwon and saying, "And you better know what you have," in a tone that made the garden laugh and made Jiwon say, sincerely, I know exactly what I have," in a way that made Diane cry and then immediately complain about her makeup. Jiwon gave a speech that she had written and rewritten 11 times. Maya knew this because Jiwon had told her, and which was funny and warm and ended with, "I told her on a terrace in May that she was real. I want to say it again now in front of everyone. Maya Carter Han. You are the most real person who has ever walked into this family, and we are better in every way that matters because you did." The garden applauded. Mrs. Han in the front row pressed 2 fingers briefly to her lips in the quiet gesture of a woman who was feeling something significant and had chosen this as the way to show it. Han Young-soo raised his glass. Later, when the reception had settled into the warm evening rhythm of good food and good music, and people who were happy to be exactly where they were, Maya found Sungjin standing near the black car at the edge of the estate drive. He had stayed. She had not expected this. He was not a reception guest, he was staff, and yet he had stayed and she understood why without asking. She went to him. "Sungjin," she said. He turned, and when he saw her in the full ivory dress with the June roses behind her, he did something she had never seen him do before. He looked genuinely moved. Not tearful, not dramatic. Just moved. The expression of a man who had made a mistake on a Thursday morning that had become the best thing he had ever done. "Mrs. Han," he said. She looked at him for a moment. It was the first time anyone had called her that, and it landed somewhere soft and significant. "You took the wrong street," she said. "Yes," he said. "Best wrong turn anyone ever made," she said. He looked at her with 19 years of dignity and something that was unmistakably joy. "Yes," he said. "I believe it was." She hugged him. He received it with the surprise of a man who had not expected it and the warmth of one who needed it. And when she pulled back, he straightened his jacket and looked at something in the middle distance and said, very quietly, "I polished the car." "I know," she said. "Thank you." He nodded once, the kind of nod that closed a thing properly, and she went back to her garden and her husband and her June evening. Jiwon found her at the edge of the rose garden at 9 o'clock. The reception was still going, the kind of party that had found its pace and was not interested in ending. But they had drifted here together the way they drifted toward certain things, naturally, without planning, the rose garden always having been the place where the most true things happened between them. The roses were extraordinary in the evening light. The string quartet had shifted to something slower and the music came soft across the garden from the reception tent, and the climbing roses on the guesthouse wall were lit from below by the garden lanterns, and the whole estate was warm and alive and exactly itself. He stood beside her and took her hand and they looked at the roses. "1 year ago," she said, "I was standing on a sidewalk in East Atlanta with $40 and a broken suitcase. 1 year ago," he said, "I was reading a note that my bride had left on her pillow." A pause. "And then Sungjin took the wrong street," she said. "And then Sungjin took the wrong street," he said. She turned to look at him. Her husband, Han Jiwon, who noticed things and said what he meant and had written her a contract amendment for a marriage proposal and stood in a garden in June and let her see every single thing on his face when she walked toward him. "Tell me something true," she said. "Their thing. Always their thing." He turned to look at her. The garden light was doing its unreasonable June thing and neither of them tried to manage it. "I would take every wrong turn," he said quietly. "Every one. 1,000 times. If they all ended here." Maya Carter Han looked at her husband in the rose garden where it had all begun and felt the full specific weight of a life that was entirely hers. Built by her own hands on her own terms, without shrinking a single part of herself to make it fit. And also now, shared with someone who had never once asked her to be less. "So would I," she said. He brought her hand up and pressed his lips to her fingers. The ring, her grandmother's diamonds, the whole story on her hand, and the June night held them and the roses held the wall and the music came soft from the tent and somewhere near the estate drive a polished black car sat clean and ready. Sungjin kept it that way. He had a feeling it had more good decisions left in it. Maya Danielle Carter, who got into the wrong car and ended up exactly where she was always meant to be. Wrong car, wrong family, completely right man, and not a single part of herself left behind. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, leave us a comment. Also like, share and subscribe to our channel, and click on the notification bell to get notified whenever a new story is made.